welcome back to another episode of the Ranger-powered Great Lakes. I'm in the hangar today, and the goal is to continue fabric covering on the left top wing. The right top wing is more or less finished. I have to go back and iron everything down again. If you saw the previous episode, I got the fabric covered on the top and bottom, all that glued on and shrunk to the final tension, and then also the initial brush coat, poly brush coat was placed on. So I've marked out all the holes in the ribs. That's a key step for these wings because the holes are pre-drilled in the wing for the rivets. So when I lay out my reinforcing tape, which is this stuff here, this is 1/2 inch wide tape. They make it in different widths. You can get it 1/4 inch, 3/8, but this is 1/2 inch because that's the width of the ribs in the wing. I'm going to mark the location out for the tapes. I'm going to lay that over the top surfaces and the bottom surface of the ribs. And then I'm going to go back through with a soldering iron and poke holes back through the reinforcing tape where the holes are in the wings. So it's important that you mark out where those holes are because you're going to be covering it up with the reinforcing tape here. So we're going to go ahead and get started. You can see the first process of what I've done here. You can see all the locations, the pencil marks. These are all holes in the wing that I'm going to burn through once I get the reinforcing tape down. So I went down all the entire wing and got everything marked and laid out. So first things first, I like to square these edges off on the tape. Just make a nice clean edge. One thing I like about this reinforcing tape, it's adhesive backed with a 3M double-sided tape to help hold it down in place. So I find the rib and I push the fabric down on either side of the rib so I can see where the edges of the rib are. I just get the tape started there and I just follow the rib up. And again, you want to stay in the center of the rib. All the way up. Now, what I do to finish the edge off is I'll take it beyond just where I want to go, and then I'll make a pencil mark at right at the back side of the leading edge. Okay, I'll make that pencil mark, then I just pull it back, make a nice little cut, and that's all there is to it. That's what it looks like. And now you can see why you make the pencil mark, because without that pencil mark, you're going to have a hard time finding the hole that you need to burn through. And you can either punch it, or what I do is heat up a soldering iron, and that'll burn through the reinforcing tape and also the base fabric down through the hole. That way that's a nice clean hole after you burn through it. But we're going to go through, there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's only 9 ribs, so I'll go ahead and lay out all the reinforcing tape on this top side, burn the hole, and then I'll go ahead and fasten the fabric with a rivet, and I'll show you how that works in a minute. Why do we even bother with reinforcing tape? What's the purpose of it? Well, reinforcing tape helps support the fabric. When you're flying through the air, what's trying to happen is the fabric is trying to balloon off the structure of the wing. So the fabric is trying to separate itself from the top of the ribs. And in doing that, if we didn't have reinforcing tape, the fabric would probably pull through the stitches or the rivets in this case, and that's an issue. And that's also the purpose of rib stitching, and in the case of the Great Lakes, rivets, is to hold the fabric down to the structure of the wing, the ribs. So it's actually a very important step. All this information, by the way, this is a polyfiber process, and it's not the only process out there. There's many different systems for fabric covering. I've used dope before, Seconite. But whatever you use, you certainly want to follow the STC and the procedures for installing the fabric. The STC spells out all the rules and the regulations, and it tells you what your glue joints, your overlap seams need to be, and they are different between the two. So pay attention to what system you're using. I'm using polyfiber here all the way up through the poly spray, which is a silver UV coat, and after that, what I'm going to put on is a Riveting top coat. So it's a urethane top coat that's going to go on top of this. I find that it's a little better. The L2 that I've owned, the Fairchild that I own, I use Seconite and dope for the entire process, and it works well. It's just very time consuming. The urethane is a little quicker, a little fewer coats. It also provides a little bit of a deeper shine with fewer coats. So that's why I decided to go with Riveting for a top coat. Taping a wing is absolutely my favorite part. We're going to get into that a little bit later, but we got to get the reinforcing tape down, get the rivets down before we start laying out the tapes. Once the tapes start going on, it really starts to look like an airplane. It's what I love about fabric work for aircraft. It's an art, it's a lost art at that. So you don't see a lot of people doing fabric work anymore. But we do it here at Newgarden Flying Field. We have a restoration side to our maintenance shop, and we've got some very good maintenance techs up there that are excellent with fabric. So give you a little history about me and where I got my interest and my knowledge on fabric work. When I was 12 years old, I knew I wanted to be involved in aviation somehow, some way, and I certainly wanted to fly. I came out to a local airport, and actually it happened to be Newgarden Flying Field, and it took a couple weeks for me to convince my parents that it was a smart thing to have a 12-year-old learn to fly. But eventually I did talk them into it. My dad drove me out to Newgarden Flying Field, dropped me off up in the parking lot, and good move for him. He said to me, he said, "Son, if you want to learn to fly, I'll drop you off. You go down and find out the information, find out what it's going to cost. We'll see how it goes from there." Walked down across the taxiway, walked into the office, and at that point, again, as 12 years old, I was kind of on the shorter side. Couldn't see over the counter, so I walked up on my tippy toes, peeked over the counter, and I said to the lady behind the desk, I said, "Hi, my name's John Martin, and I want to learn to fly." Well, she kind of peered over the counter. I think I was irritating her. She was working on something. I have no idea what. But I think I irritated her. She peered over, she had glasses, she put the glasses down on the bottom part of her nose. She said, "How old are you?" And I said, 12 years old. And she said, "Well, why don't you come back in a few years, A, when you're old enough to see over the counter, and B, really when you're old enough to learn to fly." Really kind of discouraged me at that point. I was very frustrated because I knew this was something I wanted to get involved in, but I didn't know how to do it, and I was getting turned away at the front door at Newgarden Airport. So not good. So I left there very disappointed, upset. You know, I took weeks to convince my parents to even get me out to the airport because I couldn't drive. I was only 12. So my mom introduced me to a good friend, and actually happened to be her hairdresser at the time, and he was heavily involved in remote controlled airplanes. Well, what I didn't know is remote controlled airplanes really kind of opened the doors to aviation for me in many ways, not just learning to fly, but also teaching me techniques for construction and fabric work. So I spent the next 3 years building and flying and learning to fly remote controlled airplanes. I had a hard time with it though. I couldn't understand the concept of how airplanes land. I figured you had to push down to make them go down. And really what my flight training in the RC world consisted of is a game of lawn darts. And I routinely crashed the airplanes on landing, had to bring them back and repair them at home for that entire next week to fly them again that following weekend at the flying field. I glued my fingers together. I got epoxy glue all over my parents' beautiful hardwood floors. And nevertheless, it was a wonderful time. I just lived, breathed, eat and slept RC airplanes for a couple years. I quickly realized that I needed a job to support this newfound hobby of mine, mainly because of my skill level or lack of skill level of really flying these things, because I crashed them all the time. So I came back to the local airport, again, New Garden Airport this time. I was 15, and I approached the owners of the airport, which were the DuPont family at the time, Lex and Ann DuPont. And I asked them, I said, do you guys ever hire help here at the airport after school, on the weekends, or during the summer? So I was hired here as a 15-year-old to pump gas, wash airplanes, fuel aircraft, cut the grass, and that was perfect. Whatever I could do to make a buck to support my newfound hobby of flying remote-controlled airplanes. I was now at the airport working around airplanes, and my interest just grew stronger and stronger. And I also was making a little bit of money, so I could afford some flight training at this point. Fortunately, there was a couple at New Garden Airport by the name of Tailspin Tommy and Cash Register Kate. They owned and operated a 1929 Beech Travel Air, Model 4000. Open cockpit biplane, blue fuselage, red wings. They would bring it out on the weekends. Cash Register Kate had a blue Studebaker, the blue which matched the fuselage blue of the aircraft, would bring it up to the flight line. She would sit in the back with a cash register, and her husband, Tommy, would take people flying in this aircraft. Well, they saw me working online, and they asked me if I've ever been up in an airplane. And at this point, as a 15-year-old, I had never been up in an airplane, a small airplane at that. So I, of course, said yes. They did not hesitate one bit to take me up. I don't even think they contacted my parents and asked them questions. That's fine with me. But I went flying with them, and it was a surreal experience. That true Titanic moment where the wind's blowing across your face, the smell of oil and fuel. I had a leather helmet on. I stuck my hands out into the slipstream. It was unbelievable. I knew right then and there, this is something that I had to do. So at that point, I put every dime that I could make into flight lessons. Fortunately, my dad also helped me out a bit, and I was able to solo when I was 16, get my license when I was 17. I continued my flight training here through high school. I got my private ticket, and I started building hours toward my instrument rating. I graduated high school, went to Penn State University and continued my flight training there. I want to backtrack a little bit. When I worked here online, not only did I have the opportunity to be around amazing aviators and people and pilots just to absorb information, but some of the tenants were incredible as well. And what I mean by that is one in particular tenant, his name was Joe Dinest. He and his son and Mark and Mark's brother had a business where they would restore PT-19s and PT-26s. Well, I immediately was attracted to their hangar and what they were doing, and the fabric work that they were doing, the structure on the wood, and just the whole restoration process really sparked an interest. So I used to hang out down there with them whenever I could, off hours, when I wasn't working, on the weekends. When I wasn't working, I would stop out to the airport, and I would just show up in their hangar. And Joe was awesome. He gave me a piece of sandpaper and he said, "Do you know what this is?" And I said, "Yeah, it's a piece of sandpaper." He said, "Do you know what that is?" And I said, "Yeah, that's a wing for a PT-19 that was recently covered." And he said, "Okay, well, I'm going to teach you how to sand fabric," which was awesome. I mean, he taught me everything from the gluing the fabric, the whole fabric process, all the way up through painting, and of course sanding, because they were using dope at the time. So that really sparked an interest of mine to find an airplane, to restore an airplane, and to fly it to Oshkosh, which is the world's largest air show, and to have it judged out there at Oshkosh. So I made that a goal of mine when I graduated college. So I graduated college, I found a project. It was a 1943 Taylorcraft L2, and I restored that airplane over the next 3 years. And then after college, graduated college in 01, in 04, flew that aircraft out to Oshkosh with my wife now, and we flew it from New Garden Airport to Wisconsin in a 1943 Taylorcraft L2 with a Continental 65 horsepower engine, and had a wonderful time. That airplane that year in 2004 won a Silver Wrench Award and a Best L-Bird. So I was completely excited. That aircraft went on to the restoration of a 1946 Fairchild 24. I sold the L2 when I got the Fairchild flying. We had a growing family, had kids at the time, so I needed a bigger airplane. It couldn't be a Spam cam. It had to be something classic. My requirements at the time were that it had to have wood in the airframe, hopefully in the wings, and it had to have a stick. Well, the Fairchild 24 fit that category perfectly, and that led to the next 5 years, 5,000 hours to restore that airplane. And we flew that down as a family this time, my wife and 2 kids, to Sun and Fun in 2011. And fortunately got best cabin class antique in that airplane. So story continues. I sold the L2. My son had an interest in learning to fly. And I said, well, if you're going to learn to fly, you're going to learn to fly a tailwheel airplane. So we found another L2, and he and I restored that together, and we still have that today. He ended up soloing that airplane on his 16th birthday, so that's pretty special. But I digress. But what I'm getting at is it's really the people that you surround yourself with and the people that you find at small airports that really blaze the path for me and for the future for aircraft restoration, for my career here at New Garden Flying Field as the aviation director, where we now have a maintenance shop with a Garmin dealership and a restoration side to it, where we're restoring airplanes like Fairchilds and L2s and doing fabric work. So I still really enjoy the fabric covering process, and this Great Lakes behind me is kind of sort of my flagship of a culmination of many years of work and really hard work to get to the point where I'm able to do this and to be able to share it with you all and hopefully spark an interest in the next generation of somebody out there in aircraft restoration. So I've got all the reinforcing tapes down. Now, unfortunately, one thing I've noticed, this last rib, somehow there's no holes in it. So I got to drill that, which kind of stinks because I'm going to have to clean out the metal shavings in the wing after I do that, but I can stick a vacuum down in there and get that no problem. All right, so the next step is I'm going to burn the holes through it. So I'm going to grab my iron, or my soldering iron. See how that just burns right through that fabric? Right in the center there, makes a nice little sealed hole in that reinforcing tape. Gotta have a hot soldering iron. But anyway, getting back to the aircraft restoration and my interest, it's such a rewarding process, and it is a process, and you got to think of it as that. One thing you don't want to do is think of the whole entire restoration project as one entire thing, because it certainly will become very overwhelming. And they say it's a lot like eating an elephant, one bite at a time, which is certainly true. But if you break it apart, like today I'm just working on the wings. I'm working on not the entire wing, I'm working on the fabric covering of the wing. And stay consistent, try to do a little bit every day or every week if you can. And eventually all these little pieces that you're working on will turn into an airplane at some point. All right, now for the fun part. As I mentioned before, the fabric is not stitched to the ribs in a Great Lakes according to the plans. It actually utilizes rivets. And these are a special pull rivet. It's got I don't know if you can see that, but it's got a much wider head on the top. And it's a blind rivet that you insert into the hole. Okay. And then you take your rivet gun, and you can either get a hand rivet squeezer, but because we're going to be doing a lot, this is a pneumatic squeezer. You literally just put that over, pull the trigger, and that's it. So a huge time saving. So typically what I'll do is I will do an entire rib at once. So I will take my my rivets and just lay them out in the holes. You want to make sure that they're also pressed down tightly against the ribs. Sometimes the fabric will bind up in that hole, and if that's the case, you have to get the soldering iron back out and go ahead and just run that through the hole to open it up a little bit more. All right. So a little bit of down pressure, pull the trigger, and that rivet is set. All right, there's the process for mechanically attaching the fabric to the ribs. In this case, it's rivets. You can see there's one rivet or one rib all the way done. Now I just got to step back down and do the rest of the wing. All right, I think we're going to wrap it up there. I've got a few more ribs to do to rivet. That tip rib, I've got to drill, put the reinforcing tape on and get some rivets. I'm going to go out and get a cup of coffee. It's coffee break time. But on next episode, we're going to focus on tapes. We're going to talk about different types of tapes, how to lay the tapes out, how to mark where the tapes go. But I hope you're enjoying the process of getting this Ranger-powered Great Lakes wings covered. Hopefully we'll be getting these wings in the booth soon, getting them up through its final color. So until next time.